This episode is brought to you by the Pelora Group.
Welcome back to Winning Through Culture.
I'm Tim Flanagan.
And I'm Amanda Kramer.
When culture's not a priority, people aren't a priority. Having an intentional focus helps you as a leader remain impactful and relevant as you move your business forward.
Welcome to Winning Through Culture. Well, we're excited for all of you to be back with us on another episode of Winning Through Culture. Today is going to be a little bit different. Tim and I were chatting a couple weeks back, and we've had some really impactful guests over the last few episodes that we've been able to release. And we were having this conversation about what's a way that we could put a nice bow on. We've had Dr. Goodson, and we've had Kelsey, and we've also talked about our accomplishments letter and many other themes up until this point this year. And there was a book that came to mind, and Tim said, hey, maybe we should do like a book club review. And I said, sure, why not? That sounds like fun. So that's what today's going to be. So we hope you enjoyed this content. We're going to talk about things that we took away from this particular book, and Tim will get a little bit of a lead into that. And we'll also talk about how we see those principles and mindset shifts really coming to life in what we do every day to help build a resilient and thriving culture within our organization. And we hope you'll be able to take a few of those things away for yourself as well. So Tim, tell me a little bit, or rather tell the readership and listenership a little bit more about the book that kind of sparked this book club idea.
Yeah, so we were chatting, as you mentioned. The name of the book is Learned Excellence. It is co-authored by Dr. Eric Potterat, who is a performance psychologist and a retired U.S. Navy SEAL psychologist, and Alan Eagle, a former Google executive. They published it in February of 2024, so it's a little bit over a year old. I actually heard an interview with the author, Dr. Potterat, and was really struck by some of the premises of the book. The core premise of the book is excellence is not innate. It's learned through 5 mental disciplines and built through those 5 mental disciplines. So it's summer and people read books or listen to books. And I thought, what a great way to tie into our most recent episodes, a book that kind of supports many of the stories we heard from our guests and many of the concepts.
Yeah. Well, and I think a great place to start is, so clearly you love to listen to books. So you've listened, you've read it. I've also, in the vein of I like to read, as much as I love a physical book, I did do it on my Kindle this time. But reading the book, I think a good place to start is just, what was one of your like aha moments when you were reading and listening that just kind of kept coming back to you even after you put it down or hit the stop button?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So let me, just for people listening, give a little more context. So I mentioned the 5 mental disciplines, kind of premise of the book. So they are as follows: values and goals, which is defining what matters most and is foundational in your life. The second one is mindset, being thoughtful and choosing your attitudes and having a growth versus fixed mindset. The third one is process, focusing on habits and systems over outcomes. The fourth one is adversity tolerance, which is building resilience through mental rehearsal and stress preparation. And the fifth one is balance and recovery, which is avoiding burnout by nurturing full life well-being. So those are the 5 mental disciplines we'll talk about. My aha moment, which you may laugh at and think is slightly ironic. So I think we've covered the fact in one of our many past episodes that we did a lot of deep process work in our business, where we process mapped all the different aspects of our business. And it was a very detailed, painstakingly process, in a good way. I mean, it was important, and it really was illuminating when you illustrate it, because you can kind of see where things might not work. And what my aha moment, which again may seem odd, was the chapter on process.
Yeah.
Specifically, again, a very achievement-oriented person, very focused on outcomes, but he really leans into the fact you've got to choose your habits and your systems in whatever endeavor you have in life. And he gets into some really good, deep, specific examples. That's one of the things I like about this book, is there's both good stories and real-life practical examples. But he really got into, how do you apply process to all areas of your life? And I just didn't see process that way. I saw it more as a business thing, detail thing. I'm not terribly detail oriented. I'm the big picture guy. And
you are when you need to be.
I can be. I can be.
Yes.
I certainly appreciate details, and I certainly appreciate people that are detailed. But that process piece just jumped out at me for some reason. Like, wow, there's a process to whatever it is I want to be excellent at in my life. And I need to focus on the steps of that process and the mindsets of that process to really get what I want. So that was my aha moment. So, Amanda, what was your aha moment from this book?
That's a great question. And before I hop into that, it's funny that you bring up, not funny, haha, but, just in the sense of the process work that we went through. And we talk about process in our work life all the time, right? So you want to be hard on a process if something is an issue or there's an area of opportunity, and you get to be kind on the person or the people that are involved. If you have a stated process that you can go back to and you have a process map to follow. And when we were starting that project that is an ongoing iterative situation, we actually started with a facilitator. And one of the things that I thought was just so interesting is he was explaining the work we were going to be doing, and he illustrated that, much like the book illustrates and has very specific examples. He illustrated it by starting with, so how do you brush your teeth? And every single person, like, what's step 1, what's step 1A, 1B, 1C, and then you move to 2. And every person around the table, they all kind of they were frozen, right? Because you know what you do, but you don't have it on a map. I guess if you have children, you're teaching them good dental hygiene, which I do recommend. You might have an illustrative or a story or a book or something, but you're not sitting there going, well, first I do 1, I pick my toothbrush up. Okay, great. Well, my toothbrush is red, not blue. Okay, so I have my red toothbrush. And how much toothpaste do I put on there? Is it a dime size? I hope that's probably a lot. Is it, pea size? Like, do you spread it out? Do you just put a dot on the end? Everybody does it differently. So I think, to your point, that foundational aspect of having a process, you have a process for everything you do in your life. It just might not be documented, which I just think was really cool. So if you're thinking about how is that applicable in my daily life, just go back to the teeth brushing example. You have a fun place to start. But that kind of leads me into what my aha moment was. And we talk a lot about in process work, and I shared this already, but you're able to be hard on the process and kind on the person. And for me, the aha was his very specific example around the black box method. So for those of you who've listened along for a long time, we talk about this quite often, and I will be the first to admit this about myself. I very much strive for perfection, realizing that's not obtainable. And sometimes you're in the moment and something doesn't go exactly how you planned, or there is an area of opportunity, or there's an issue that comes up, or a mistake happens. And it's hard not to get wrapped up in that. And I think the black box method really stuck with me because it's able to, or rather it's a roadmap, it's a process to be able to compartmentalize setbacks and really still perform at your best in that moment, and then be able to go back and digest that and be really intentional with how you digest that mistake, that opportunity, that issue that came up. And that ties back into all the other pieces that he was discussing in the book. And for me, I often want to be like, okay, I want to only focus on the issue or the mistake or what could have been better. And sometimes I forget that larger picture of all of these other wonderful things that happened. And I think being able to utilize that methodology will be really cool. So I haven't done it yet, but I am excited to start using that in our daily life. So it's definitely an aha moment for me.
That's a good one. And it kind of reminds me of something we've talked about before on this podcast, which is measure progress, the gap in the gain concept. Don't look at the one thing that went wrong when 9 things went well.
Right.
Don't obsess over that.
Don't obsess. Yeah. Properly put it where it needs to go. Come back and have a thoughtful discussion around it.
Yep.
And then move on. You're able to do that. And I think that's the important, as we've kind of talked about, the outcomes are great, but oftentimes the progress you've made and the process you instilled to get there is more often important than that end result. Those leading indicators sometimes mean more than that lagging indicator of that number that's on the spreadsheet. So it's something to just kind of keep in mind.
Yeah. And again, the process is all you can control at the end of the day, your attitude and your behaviors and your habits.
Yeah. Well, cool. So I think from a standpoint of, you've been from a everyday role perspective, you've been in the seat you're in for a very long time. I'm not going to age you by saying how long, And you've had the opportunity to really step into a growth mindset, which this book continuously comes back to. And I would be interested, like, in what ways have you seen a growth mindset pay off for you as a leader and an entrepreneur, showing up day in and day out, constantly looking for that other side of mindset where people kind of get stuck and fixed? I feel like you, as long as I've known you, have always stepped into that space of growth.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a combination of things, all of which are intentional or intentionally minded. One is curiosity. Two is just a lack of satisfaction with the status quo. In the Strengths Finder, one of my strengths is maximizer, which in essence means I'm always looking for ways to improve upon things or situations or myself, which does lend itself to a growth mindset. I think it's being really intentional. I was not a good student, as we've talked about before, in school. If I had, decided my lot in life was going to be tied to my SAT scores or my academics, I definitely wouldn't be on this podcast with you. I dare say I'm not sure where I'd be.
Relieving that label at the door.
Yeah,
right?
no, that's what I'm saying. I was blessed to have that growth mindset, which again kind of caused me to constantly be setting goals, looking at what's possible, stretching what's possible, and looking for what's next in the sense of what can we do today? What can we do now to push ourselves to a better place, myself personally, the organization. So, and he references the work on this topic of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. It's a book I've read and recommended to several people, but it's definitely something you got to be intentional to, you got to be open-minded to, and you got to stay, back to process, you got to stay focused in, because it's easy if you're not careful under a variety of different circumstances, including fatigue, to slip into a fixed mindset.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he referenced in the book, and forgive me, I don't remember which page it was on. I'm sure I could go back and find it, but he talks about, like, in Major League Baseball and to focus on getting just 1% better. And I know we've talked about batting averages on some podcasts and things like that, and everyone throws that around. And I think that the important part is that it's reframing what progress is, because oftentimes we want, in the world we live in today, you and I were just having a conversation about AI, which we talk about a lot now, and I know we've done a podcast on it, but we want instant gratification and you want to see the trend line go up very quickly. And I think oftentimes we get lost in just the 1% better from a progress standpoint really lends itself to what you were saying with your aha moment, which is if you're focused being intentional with your process, like that steady trend line is much more valuable to the overall business and the health of the business and dare I say, the health of the culture of the business and those that are working with you. If you can kind of take a step back and say, I don't need to go from 10 to 100, I need to go from 10 to 11 right now. And I thought that was a unique way to kind of put it in perspective, that you are kind of looking for like a breakthrough that leads you to that 1% versus 10x growth, books out there and podcasts we're listening to, and you kind of have to distill it down. I thought it was a really poignant way to say that you really just need to focus on incremental growth.
Yeah, you mentioned 10x. 10x is a mindset. And again, kind of back to that growth mindset, what's possible. Your 1% better every day, though, is definitely something that done over a prolonged period of time compounds into a tremendous leap in performance and success. No doubt.
Well, it's sustainable, right? You and I have had a lot of conversations about the importance of recovery and, attuning not only to the professional, but we talk a lot about going and meeting the person where they are. We're all humans at the end of the day. And that means that we need to have consideration for our physical health and our mental health and our spiritual health. And it's not just the business aspect of it. There's always another element there that needs consideration and needs input and time and space and rest. And there's an importance there that you want to have sustainable growth or in progress so you can articulate what you need when you need it and do what you need to do as a leader to be able to say, hey, I really do need to and I know he talks about this in the book, which I thought was also cool and I noted it down, but the whole idea of a dimmer switch. And I think he probably said like white hot. I would say like you need to be red hot at times. And then you need to be able to know like when I need to dim that down and I need recovery. And I think some of the examples that you've shared over our time together have been really good, that it's not equal. And we talk about our core value as an organization of balance. It's not 50-50. People say like work life, life work. It's never going to be equal. There's going to be a percentage of time where one needs more from you than the other. And I think it's just being able to recognize that when your dimmer needs to be all the way up or needs to be all the way down, so you can really focus on what's important for you to be able to show up really well in all areas of your life. Do you have any examples or anything you'd like to throw out there that you feel have been helpful for you to be able to recognize when you maybe need to turn your dimmer switch on, or at the same time, ways in which you take rest and recover so you can give your best and you can continuously have sustainable growth as a leader?
Well, yeah, my dimmer switch usually is, I get the problem that lights are bright. I think as I was listening to you say that, Amanda, and this kind of goes into one of the themes in the resiliency and recovery component of the book, which is the fifth mindset. Something that I have become more aware of as I've matured, I guess is the right word. And that is that there will be seasons of life that the priority order of some of your life domains will shift.
Mm-hmm.
And as a business owner, I have been made very aware over the last couple of years that, being 100% all in all the time in your business, which is what a lot of business owners do, is going to have repercussions. And those repercussions are going to be in relationships, in your health, in your spiritual life, in some of your outside of your work interests. And I think that, kind of going back to your dimmer switch analogy and just the whole idea of recovery is how do you intentionally, which I've not been great at, put a priority order to some of those domains of life,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that there's a right priority to those that will allow you to perform at a high level in all of those areas. And then there's the priority or the order of priority, if you will, that the world tells us to pursue. I quote unquote know better, but I'm catching myself all the time having to really look at how am I showing up in those areas. And taking that back to your rest and recovery, that's something that I've, again, not really been good at over the years. I finally was convinced by a functional doctor and a nutritionist to focus on both of those things as it related to my Spartan racing and performance just in general. And it was, quite frankly, shocking to me as to how effective that was. Again, not my normal speed. It was like full speed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not healthy. But that's what I was used to. That was my habit. I guess if you want to say, as he says in the book, we all have a process. It's just a question of whether it's the process that you develop that's serving you well or not so much. And my process was not serving well. But I've really made a super intentional effort, and I'm being challenged to do so all the time to make sure that the rest and recovery part of my life is in order. And it's, for me, counterintuitive in the sense that, I don't have time to have downtime, but I have learned I don't have time not to have downtime.
Well, and the other part of that is that you've surrounded yourself, and I'm with you every day, so I can speak to this, I think, pretty freely. You surrounded yourself with people who are willing to be radically candid and share that with you, whether, that's in your personal circle or your professional circle or a blend of the two, to be like, hey, you need to do this for you. And so you can show up the way that we all know you want to show up. And I think that that's really, A, it's vulnerable of you, which I commend, always have. And then B, you're really modeling that for the people that you're leading. And, I used to consider when people would ask, we've been through a lot of transitions together, you and I. I've been through a few, let's just be honest about that. And I always kind of prided myself on, I was the resilient one. I was the one that was still standing. I'd figure it out, like whatever that was. And you kind of wear, we'll talk about labels. And if you listen to the episode that we had with Kelsey, we talked a lot about how you talk about somebody's attributes and those types of things. And, my answer would be like, what makes me special? Well, yeah, I am resilient. I'm the one that's always, last one standing. And I don't wear that as a badge of honor anymore, right? Like there is an element to prepare to be able to be resilient and to face adversity in a certain way. And he does talk about that in the book. Like that is a mindset, but it's not a label that you have to constantly, kind of slap on and say, okay, like as a leader, like I'm always going to be resilient. You will in a certain way, but you have the opportunity to invite people into your life that can say, you really do need to rest right now. Lovingly sent me a message. And based on when this episode is released, we'll just say it was a while back. And you were like, hey, I think you probably need an Amanda day.
Yes, I do.
Right? And like you do that for me and you have a collective team that does that for you. And I think that you're modeling that behavior. You're modeling that mindset and being able to say, hey, like I care so much about you that I'm willing to say this to you. And I, of course, took it very like, this is great. Yes, thank you for acknowledging that. Because sometimes you don't see it in yourself. And I think that's the part of being like, okay, 1% better every day, being able to recognize it, put some practices into place. So it almost becomes a process, a rinse and repeat. This is how this is going to go. And you can go back if there is an opportunity or a mistake or you kind of fall flat on your face, you can be like, cool, I didn't follow my own process, which is important.
Yeah, I think that gets to the value of community, which he doesn't have specifically as a call out in the book, other than the fact that his work was with the U.S. Navy SEALs, who arguably are probably of all, the high performance organizations in America, that is a organization with a strong sense of community, a strong sense of team, and having one another's backs.
Yeah, you have to have that. You have to build your circle.
Yep.
And I know we call it a community oftentimes in our daily work, and it really is. Like we show up in all the times in which we want to celebrate, and we also show up in all the times in which we need to provide sympathy and empathy and everything in between. And that's really, really important, I think, as you're working to build a culture that at the end of the day is thriving, is winning. I mean, the title of our podcast is Winning Through Culture, right? So if you're looking for how to, really instill and win from a cultural perspective, I think that's a really important part is the people that you're inviting into that community space that you're working to build. So if there are individuals listening, they maybe haven't read the book, right? We've talked a little bit about the principles that he goes over, some of those specific examples. Is there any like one thing that we talk about what works really well, what we've done that hasn't worked so great? Is there one thing, one principle, one shift, 1% better that you think even our organization could do a little bit differently to continuously move towards progress?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, the whole idea of a personal credo, which we didn't really touch on much, but both personal and organizational. I think the thing that jumped out at me, and it may be semi-situational to something I dealt with last week, which could be a whole separate episode we won't get into, was around adversity tolerance. And obviously, you're going to face adversity in your life. You're going to face adversity in your business. It's a natural part of life. And if you're going to grow, you're definitely going to face adversity. And I think that he had some real practical pieces in the book from an organizational perspective or individual perspective on how do you build a tolerance to adversity. And I know for me last week, some of it was something I was dealing with, and Audrey and I had a conversation at the end of the week in the morning, and kind of agreed to just reframe the situation, and not to the way I was feeling about it, which was true. My feelings were true, but back to process, the reality is my feelings weren't going to change anything about it. And it was something that we could choose to see through a different light and have the tolerance to deal with, or choose to see through a light of feelings that were upsetting and then be paralyzed and immobilized and, eventually be a victim. So I think in today's day and age, that adversity tolerance chapter and concept, I think, is super important for teams and organizations, and obviously starts at an individual level.
Yeah. And he talks about, utilizing visualization, doing contingency planning. Like you don't want to have plan 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way to 100, but you do want to think about what those outcomes could potentially be and create for you, right, a different expectation and how you frame the situation that you are in. So you could come at it from a growth mindset. So they're all tied together. So if you do choose to read the book, which we encourage you to do, you'll definitely see that they build on one another and kind of tie back in and loop between each other all the way through the end, which I thought he did a really nice job with. And also talks about when you are thinking about, developing resilience and have the opportunity to work through your adversity tolerance, what that level is, just like how we talk in our industry about risk tolerance, right? It might not be the same at that moment in time in a year. It might look different for you based on your situation. But if you have routines that you've built, going back to your aha moment of process, and you have that pre and kind of post situation standard that you're looking to follow, it does make it a lot easier as an individual or as a leader, as an entrepreneur, for you to work through that for yourself and be able to reframe conversations and situations so you can continuously work on that progress element.
Yeah. Well, I would encourage people to read the book. There are things in the book that you've probably heard of or read of before, but they're pulled together in a nice way that makes it all make sense. And, the stories and the experiences of the authors are real and have been applied to real life situations that can make you better. And we're all about helping each other and helping those that listen to this podcast get better every day. So thanks for listening to another episode of Winning Through Culture.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And if you have books, if you like this style, again, this is a new one for us to kind of do a book club review. So if you have a book that you're reading right now, drop it in the comments. Let us know what is of interest to you. And Tim loves, I always kind of joke, I laugh. I walk into my office and there's a new book on my desk, which I do love. At some point, though,
It's been a while, by the way.
It's been a while, but he suggested this one, and this was a cool experience to kind of share. And I think there's a lot to be said for taking what we're consuming as leaders and entrepreneurs and being able to digest it in this real environment and use our examples of what we do every day and kind of help everyone process how it might be applicable to them. So if you do have something you're interested in and you like this type of episode, please do comment, let us know. And we look forward to seeing you on another episode real soon. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Winning Through Culture.
Until next time, stay intentional, be impactful,
because your culture matters.